So we are reviewing week 23. So today is day 162. If you're following the reading schedule on Google Docs or the printouts. If you have one of the Chronological Bibles, we're on June 11th. So we're halfway through, which is amazing. So last week's memory verse was Proverbs 30, verse 5, and that is, every word of God is pure, or proves true. He is a shield to those who put their trust in him. And that was Proverbs 30, verse 5. This week, we are going to memorize Luke chapter 6, verse 38. And that says, give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be put into your bosom. For with the same measure that you use, it will be measured back to you. And that is Luke 6:38 in the New King James Version. This week, we are going to review the Song of Solomon. And the reason I wanted to do a full day to review the Song of Solomon is because it's just one of the most profound books that basically represents the love of Christ for his church. And I believe the other important thing about the Song of Solomon is that it shows a level of maturity throughout, or like somebody growing, right, and becoming more mature in the Lord. And I think as far as what this Bible study is about, it's about leadership development. And so I think the Song of Solomon really is a good example of how we mature in the Lord. And we see that. So the Song of Solomon, the title of the Song of Solomon in Hebrew is actually Shir Shirim, which means the Song of Songs, the greatest song, right? And it's right in chapter 1, verse 1, it says, this is the Song of Songs, the greatest song ever written by Solomon. And the Song of Solomon was written probably early on in his reign, so probably somewhere around 965 BC, just a few years into his reign. And the Song of Solomon, it is, well, I think Rabbi Akiva, he's a rabbi who lived, and he was a Jewish theologian and historian. He lived in the 1st century AD, so he was really worked from 50 AD to around 130 AD. So within 20 years of Christ going to the cross, Rabbi Akiva was writing and kind of doing his thing as a Jewish scholar. He was also executed by the Romans towards the beginning of the 2nd century. And what he wrote is, all the writings, all scripture is holy. But the Song of Solomon, the Song of Songs, is the holiest of holies. So as far as books in the Bible, the Song of Solomon can kind of be equated to the holy place, the Holy of Holies, right? And it represents marriage, romance, physical love, and a human marriage. So there's that aspect to the Song of Solomon, but it also symbolizes Christ's love for the church. And so I think that's why it is considered one of the holiest of scriptures. In Jewish tradition, it's read every year on the 8th day of Passover. So people would read this to the community. So people get up and they read this. It's almost like how, people read the night before Christmas, around Christmas time. It's just something that they do. And so it's a holy book. It's something they read on one of the holiest times in the Jewish calendar. And it really, just because they read it during Passover, it kind of indicates the importance of this book, right? So from the Jewish perspective, it signifies the relationship between God and Israel. And of course, from the Christian perspective, it represents the relationship between Christ and his church. And although the Song of Solomon is very poetic and symbolic, the references are real, right? The character, it mentions Solomon specifically as the bridegroom in this book. So these are historical people. I told you, according to Jewish tradition, that Abishag, who is the young woman who took care of King David towards the end of his life, she's actually the bride in this. So yeah, a lot of times people talk about the Song of Solomon, especially the secular world. They talk about it like it's a fairy tale, like about Prince Charming, something along those lines, like a Jewish fairy tale. But it's not. These are historical people that actually lived. The book is very poetic and beautiful, but it's not a story. It's a historical event. Most scholars do kind of lean towards a literal interpretation of the Book of Solomon, or Song of Solomon. They say it's like a Jewish educational book, like teaching young people about physical love and marriage. And the Song of Solomon does depict human love and this idyllic type of marriage. But the beauty and mystery of that love stems from the Creator, right? Who is the very source of love.
That's right. Amen.
It's rooted in God's words at creation, where he decreed everything is good, right? And the Song of Solomon is all about relationship. It comes down to that, right? A relationship between a husband and wife, a bride and the bridegroom, Christ and his church. However you cut it, it's about relationship. So we know Abishag is traditionally considered the bride in this. And the reason we do that, even at the heading of it, it calls the Shulamite woman, right, is the bride. And Abishag was from Shunem, right? So she's a Shunammite. And really, it's really pretty much the same thing. The word has become interchangeable just because of the way it's been translated over the years. Shunammite, or Shunem, is also the feminine version of shalom, or peace, which is also the masculine version of this is Solomon, which means, peace. So both the bride and the bridegroom, their names mean peace. And we remember reading about Abishag and how Adonijah, David's eldest living son, he tried to take the throne from Solomon, and David made him king. And then Solomon told him, if you don't cause any trouble, you can live. If you do cause trouble, you're dead. And then he went through Bathsheba and said, look, I'm the oldest living son. The throne should have been mine. The least you can do is ask Solomon to let me have Abishag as a wife. But really, because you remember when Absalom, who is Adonijah's brother, his full brother, Absalom when he took the throne from David, he slept with 10 of David's concubines in full view of the entire city. So Abishag, being one of David's concubines, Adonijah wanting to take her as a wife, really was very disrespectful, and kind of his way of trying to retain some of the authority and power that he wanted as king. And so we know Solomon had him executed because of it. So we start off with the young woman, or Abishag, the bride, the Shulamite woman, or the representation of the church, the body of Christ. So we have Abishag, we have the young women of Jerusalem, who are another character in this. And the young women of Jerusalem, I believe, represent the bridesmaids, right? So this is something that they would read every Passover, and it was meant for the entire community, right? So they talk about the bride, and then they talk about the young women of Jerusalem, right? So I believe simply that the daughters of Jerusalem were Abishag's ladies in waiting, right? I believe they were the bridesmaids. And when it was read on the 8th day of Passover, it came to represent young unmarried women, right? Who are repeatedly encouraged not to awaken romantic love before its time, right? They say that over and over again. The bride warns the women of Jerusalem not to awaken love before it's time, not to put their hand to it, not to rush it, right? To wait until it's right. And so we see that. We also see the young man or the bridegroom, who is Solomon, and he symbolizes Christ, the heavenly bridegroom. And then there's a part towards the end where we read, and it says it's the young woman's brothers, right? And I believe that they probably literally are just the groomsmen, right? Who probably were or could have been Abishag's actual brothers. So they're referenced in this book. And these may have literally been her brothers who would have served as Solomon's groommen. But in the 8th day of Passover, the reading, they would have represented young unmarried men, right? So it's a community lesson, basically. They're instructing the young women who aren't married yet and the young men who aren't married yet not to rush love, to wait, that it'll come in time. And also for the young men to respect young women when we get to the part where it's talking to the Shulamite woman's brothers, or Abishag's brothers, the young men, basically, of Jerusalem. It's saying to respect a woman's virtue. You can see how it's kind of a community lesson for morality and saving physical love for marriage, right? So we're obviously going to focus on the Christian perspective of Song of Solomon, and that is how it applies to Christ, his bride, his church, or you and me, and the relationship and how we're to mature in our relationship with God, right? Just as any relationship grows, our relationship with God needs to grow. Us as the church and us individually. So in Song of Solomon 1:1, we get the title of it. Then the young woman, Abishag, is speaking, and she says, "Kiss me and kiss me again, for your love is sweeter than wine. How fragrant your cologne." And fragrance here represents the presence of someone, right? The physical manifestation of someone's presence. So if somebody's been in the room, even when they've left, you can still smell their cologne or their perfume. And that's what she's talking about here. But we can kind of see in this, the first 4 verses, she's saying, kiss me again, take me with you, come, let's run away together. So she has the desire for her bridegroom, but this is all kind of self-centered, right? She's like, kiss me, take me with you, draw me. It's nothing about what she can do for him or her love for him. It's kind of just on this really immature level right now. She's kind of just infatuated, but it's all about what she can get out of the relationship. And we see that. So, but draw me, she's praying, draw me. That's an extremely important prayer, right? We need to want to be drawn to the Lord, right? And that's what she's praying. And then she's committing herself, right? If you draw me, I will run after you, right? So we see that. We see that even though she's kind of being self-centered here, it's all about her, there is this level of commitment on her part. So, and then as we read through, we see the young women of Jerusalem, how happy We are for you, O King. We praise your love even more than wine. And then the young woman is speaking again. How right they are to adore you. I am dark and beautiful, but O women of Jerusalem, dark as the tents of Kedar. Don't stare at me because I am dark. The sun has darkened my skin. My brothers were angry with me. They forced me to care for their vineyards, so I couldn't care for myself and my own vineyard. Again, she's focusing on herself here. There is nothing wrong with self-care, right? And there are times when people will drive you to do things for them, and then you don't have time to do what you need to do for you. How many of you have ever had that experience? Yeah, me too. Right. But here, she's still kind of focused on herself here. Like, she's still saying, it's not fair, woe is me. There's just that level of immaturity you can kind of see. And she says, tell me, my love, where you are leading your flocks today, where you rest your sheep at noon. For why should I, like a prostitute or veiled woman, why should I wander like a prostitute or veiled woman among your friends and their flocks? So here she's saying, I want to be with you, but I don't want to have to work for it. I don't want to have to pay attention. Just tell me where you're going to be, and I'll meet you there. But I don't want to have to run around looking for you, right? I don't want to have to pay attention. So you see that level of immaturity. Plus, if she had known him really, if she already knew him really well, and they had a deep relationship, she would already know where he was going. Old married couples, the wife knows where her husband is just by the time of day it is, right? She knows his habits and where he goes and what he does. But she's just wanting a shortcut. She wants him to tell her what to do because she doesn't want to have to spend time and energy finding him. And sometimes we do that with God. We want it easy, right? We don't want to take the time that we need to develop a relationship with him. We want a shortcut. But there are no shortcuts, right? There are no shortcuts in our relationship with God. So the young man, or Solomon, the bridegroom, says, if you don't know, O most beautiful woman, follow the trail of my flock and graze your young goats by the shepherd's tent. So if you don't know, follow those who've gone before you, right? Follow the other people, or the other sheep. Follow the flock. And he sees her beauty and her potential in this passage, right? He talks about how lovely she is and how beautiful she is and how we put some some earrings on and a necklace on to really showcase and enhance your beauty. So he saw the beauty that was there, but he also saw the potential, right? That there's more she could do. Just like God looks at us and he sees us for who we are, but he also sees what we are, the finished product, who he's called us to be. So then the young woman is speaking again. The king is lying on his couch, enchanted by the fragrance of my perfume. And so again, we're talking about perfume, right? The manifest presence, someone's manifest presence. So you can tell they've been there because of their smell. You just know it speaks of presence. But we also know that the process of making perfume is a process of crushing, right? To crush the flowers, to extract the oil and the fragrance. So to produce a fragrance, there needs to be a crushing. And so that's very symbolic of that. So then the young man, or the bridegroom, is speaking again. How beautiful you are, my darling. Your eyes are like dove's eyes. And again, when we see the references to dove's eyes, doves have a singular focus, right? They only have one mate. It's all about one person. So they have a singular, solitary focus. And it's important that we do too, as the bride of Christ. Chapter 2, she says, I am the spring crocus blooming on the Sharon plain, or I am the rose of Sharon, the lily of the valley. And the young man agrees, like a lily among thistles is my darling among young women. Basically, he's saying you're surrounded by thorns. You see, then the young woman talks about, like the finest apple tree in the orchard is my lover among other men. I sit in his delightful shade. He covers her, right? He's her covering, and men are the priests of their home. They cover their families. So she's talking about sitting in the shade of his protection, right? Of his covering. And then I'm going to skip down to verse 8 of chapter 2. I hear my lover coming. He is leaping over mountains, bounding over hills. My lover is like a swift gazelle or a young stag. So we start to see that just relentless love of God, right? There's nothing that can separate us from the love of God. She knows that he would bound mountains for her, and no matter what, he'd come after her and find his way to her. Then we see verse 10, she's saying, my lover said to me, rise up, my darling, come away with me, my fair one. Now he's telling her to rise up and come away. Before, she was begging to be with him, remember? She was saying, beckon me, and I'll run after you, we'll run away together. And now he's telling her to rise up and come away with him. So we can kind of see at first she was all intent and trying to follow him. But then she realized it was going to be a lot of work. He wasn't going to just tell her where to meet him. She was going to have to pay attention. And so now we kind of see her not wanting to get up and follow him. And then he says, and then again she's saying, he told her, look, the winter is past, and the rains are over and gone. The flowers are springing up, and the season of singing birds has come, and the cooing of turtle doves is in the air. Rise up, my darling, and come away with me, my fair one. He's telling her it's a new season. It may have worked before for you just to, put in the minimum effort, but that's not going to work anymore, right? It's not, what worked before isn't going to work now. And so then, this is interesting. I was reading it in verse 14, and this is chapter 2 still. The young man says, my dove is hiding behind the rocks, behind an outcrop on the cliff. Let me see your face. Let me hear your voice. For your voice is pleasant and your face is lovely. Does this passage remind you guys of anything else we've read in this Bible study? It reminds me of Exodus, right? When Moses asked God, he said, show me, can I see your face? Will you show me your glory? If you're going with me, if you're going with us, let me see your face. Let me see your glory. And God hid him in the cleft of the rock and covered his hand while his glory passed by. We kind of see this relationship here, right? That's similar. Like Moses wanted to see God's face, and Moses and the Lord had an amazing relationship, but it was a love relationship, right? And so he just wanted to see his face. So now we kind of hear this. This is the bridegroom saying this to the bride. So it's kind of come full circle. When in Exodus, I think it's 33, towards the end of Exodus 33, is when Moses asked to see the Lord's face or his glory. And the Lord hid him in the cleft of the rock. And so we see that here. And the young women of Jerusalem warn of all the foxes, those little foxes, catch them before they ruin the vineyard of love. And so it's kind of a warning there. The young woman says, my lover is mine and I am his. Or I am my beloved and he is mine, is what it says in the King James Version. So again, this is a very self-centered, right? She's saying, I am his and he is mine, right? So she still wants him, but it still surrounds her and what's good for her, what she wants. And so then we move on to chapter 3, and the young woman's talking, and she says, "One night as I lie in my bed, I yearned for my lover. I yearned for him, but he did not come," right? She was just waiting for him to show up, but he didn't show up. And so she said to herself, "I will get up and roam the city." Is there anything wrong with that? I'll get up and I'll roam the city. What did he tell her? Yeah, do sheep graze in the city? Why would she run around the city? That's where she wanted him to be, right? But he wasn't who she wanted him to be, right? She wasn't going to hang out where he wasn't going to hang out where she was comfortable, but she was still looking for him there because that's where she wanted him to be. She's looking for him in the city when he said, "If you want to find me, follow where the sheep graze," right? Not going to be in the city. But she said she's searching for him, so I searched everywhere and did not find him. The watchmen stopped me as they made their rounds, and I asked, "Have you seen the one I love?" Then scarcely had I left them when I found my love, and I caught him and held him tightly. So basically, he's coming back from the herds or tending the sheep, and she runs into him, but she wasn't really looking for him where he said he would be. And she says, promise me, O women of Jerusalem, by the gazelles and the wild deer, not to awaken love until the time is right. So don't awaken it until it's ready." And then we see the women of Jerusalem speaking. So they're talking about the carriage coming, the wedding day. The young woman said, "Come out to see King Solomon, young women of Jerusalem. He wears the crown his mother gave him on his wedding day, his most joyous day." And then we get to chapter 4, and Solomon, or the bridegroom, is talking. Verse 12, "You are my private garden, my treasure, my bride, a secluded spring and a hidden fountain." So he's telling his bride, "You are my private garden." So this speaks of a dwelling place. When Jesus said, "In my Father's house there are many mansions," the actual translation there is, "In my Father's house there are many dwelling places." There are many dwelling places that are just one-on-one dwelling places. So it's talking about an intimate relationship, a dwelling place, right? A conversation. So I kind of equate this to a telephone call. If I pick up the phone and I call Tracy, it doesn't matter how many people are around. We have a connection, be it through the phone, where it's just a conversation between her and I. I don't mean like if we put it on a speaker or not, but anyway, there's this place of communion or this place of conversation between her and I that is just for us. Like we have our own way of communicating, right? The inside stories. She can say a little word that nobody else would pick up on except for me because of the intimacy of our relationship, right? But we have that fellowship or that dwelling place, right? That's just for her and I. It's a secret garden. But the bridegroom here is telling the bride, "You are my secret garden," right? So who else could dwell in us but Christ, right? And we see that here. He's saying, "You are my secret garden. You are that intimate dwelling place. You are a garden fountain, a well of fresh water streaming down from Lebanon's mountains." And then the young woman starts speaking, "Awake, north wind, rise up, south wind." Anytime we see wind, we think of the Holy Spirit. "Blow on my garden, spread its fragrance all around. Come into your garden, my love, and taste its fruit." So if we're talking about romantic love, this is referring to the marriage bed or consummation of the marriage. When we're talking about Christ and his church, we're talking about this woman accepting Jesus, right? It's talking about salvation. Come in, right? welcoming him into her heart to become that dwelling place, right? He's saying, you're my dwelling place. I desire to be with you. And she's still on this very superficial relationship with him. But now's the point where they're consummating. And she's saying, come into my heart, right? She's asking the Lord into her heart, come into this dwelling place, your secret garden. And in chapter 5, it starts out, I have entered my garden, my treasure. I gather my myrrh with spices and eat honeycomb with my honey and drink wine with milk. And then the young women of Jerusalem, O lover and beloved, eat and drink, yes, drink deeply of your love. And then the bride says, I slept, but my heart was awake. When I heard my lover knocking and calling, open to me, my treasure, my darling. So her relationship is maturing, right? So she fell asleep, but she woke up and she's longing for her bridegroom. And she said she heard him knocking and calling, right? Well, we see in Revelations 3, verse 20, behold, if any man open the door unto me, I will come in and sup with him. Right? To sup is to feed with, commune, that communion. I will sup with him and him with me. So there will be an exchange, right? Or communion. So she says, my dove, my perfect one, my head is drenched with dew. Or this is what he's saying to her. My dove, my perfect one, my head is drenched with dew. My hair is damp with the night. But he's asking her to come in. So, right, he's saying this to the woman, right? The bridegroom's saying it to the bride. But I responded back to him. So he's outside the door, he's knocking. And he's saying, let me in. I'm damp from the dew. And she says in verse 3 of chapter 5, she responds, but I've taken off my robe. Should I get dressed again? I have washed my feet. Like she washed her feet. She got herself into bed. She was all comfortable. And she's saying, should I get up again? Should I soil my feet? So he tried to unlock the door. And then when he tried to unlock the door, my heart thrilled within me. So being a Christian, sometimes it's not convenient to nurture our relationship with the Lord. And actually, when we decide to go deeper with the Lord, when we ask him into our heart, it seems like everything that can go wrong will go wrong, and everything will happen to try to distract us. Have any of you decided, like, okay, I'm going to start spending an hour with the Lord every day, and without fail, the phone will ring 100 times in that hour, right? Like, that's just what happens. It's not convenient. And so having an intimate love relationship with Christ means fellowshipping in his sufferings, right? To just say, no matter what, regardless, I'm going to do it. Whether I've gotten in bed, washed my feet, done all of that stuff. If the Lord wants to speak with me at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to get up. Like, I'm going to have that relationship with him. So he tried to unlatch the door, but the Lord is a gentleman. He's not going to force himself in, right? And so she says, I jumped to open up the door for my love, and my hands dripped with perfume. So when she went to open up the door, she just missed him, right? Her hands smelled like him because he had just touched the door right before she did. And it says, but she opened to him and he was gone. Like, because she didn't respond right away, right? When the timing, she wanted it to be more convenient for her. And so when she finally got up and answered the door, he was gone. So, okay, chapter 5, verse 16. It's the bride talking, and she's talking about the bridegroom. His posture is stately, like the noble cedars of Lebanon. His mouth is sweetness itself. He is desirable in every way. So do you remember when he was saying, the bridegroom said that his bride was beautiful and desirable in every way? And now she's got to the point where she's grown and she sees that he's desirable in every way. And then chapter 6, the young woman says, my lover has gone down to his garden. So he left, but now she knows where he is, right? So before, she asked him to tell her where he was going to go so she didn't have to look for him. And then we see her looking all throughout the city when he told her he'd be out in the field with the sheep. And now, after she missed him, she's married, she's welcomed him into her life, into her heart. Her relationship with him is growing. Now she knows intuitively that he is down in his garden, right? She knows where he is. And then we see her say in verse 3, I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. So now there's still a selfish aspect to it, like I am his and he is mine, but she at least is putting him first in this case, right? So we see this maturing. One, she knows where he is without him having to tell her. She's willing to put in the effort, and she knows him enough to know intuitively where he is, right? So she's starting to see him as desirable in every way, right? Every way. And she knows where he is, and she's saying, I am my beloved's, and he is mine. She's putting him first. So we see this maturity growing in their relationship. In chapter 7, the bridegroom is saying, how beautiful are your sandaled feet, O queenly maiden. This is the first time he's referring to her as queenly, right? And he's saying, how lovely are your sandaled feet. She's prepared to go with him wherever it is, right? She's not barefoot. She's not worried about her feet getting dirty. She's got sandals on her feet, right? She's ready to go and travel. And travel the distance, do whatever it takes to stay with him. She's not going to let him go on without her anymore, right? She's going with him. We see that maturing in the relationship. So the bridegroom says, the king is held captive by your hair, how pleasing, my love, how full of delight. And then we get down to verse 10. And she says, I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me. Now, everything that she said in that statement is about him, right? I am his, and his desire is for me. She is loving him unconditionally, right? It doesn't matter what's reciprocated, right? It's not give and take. She's not saying, oh, this marriage is 50-50. She's saying it's all about you, right? So that maturity, that unconditional love we see here. I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me. She is solely focused on her husband. She has that dove's eye, right? That singular, solitary focus. She's not looking at herself anymore in any way. It's not about what she can get out of the relationship. It's that she is his because he desires her, not because I desire him too, or I am his and he is mine. Like, well, it's 50-50. No, she's saying it's all about him. She's not looking in the city anymore. It says in verse 11, come, my love. This is her speaking. Come, my love, let us go out to the fields and let us spend the night among the wildflowers. She's not making him stay in the city limits anymore, right? She's not worried about going out in the field and following the flocks. She's got her shoes on, and she's saying, let's go out into the wilderness. I'm going to go out with you, and you know what? I'll spend the night out there with you. I don't even care. I just want to be with you, right? We see that maturity here, where she's not worried about her own comfort. She doesn't have to be tucked in her own bed, worried about getting out and putting a robe on or washing her feet again. She's saying, no, let's go. I'll go camping with you. Now, guys, how many of you know if your wife is willing to go camping with you, that she really wants to spend time with you, right? And we see that here, right, in the Song of Solomon. in 965 BC. So, and she says, there in this wilderness place, I will give my love to you. There the mandrakes give off their fragrance, and the finest fruits are at our door, with new delights as well as old, which I have saved for you, my love. Again, we see that she is matured, and she loves her beloved unconditionally, and it's deeper than just a physical love, right? She's saying, oh, I wish you were my brother. Then I could kiss you no matter where we were with whoever's watching. Because at that time, there were no public displays of affection. But if it were brother and sister, it was acceptable. So she's just saying, I wish it's not about physical love anymore. I just want to be close to you, right? And she's just expressing her love for him. And it's unconditional. And again, she's imploring the women of Jerusalem, do not awaken love until it is time. And the women of Jerusalem respond, who is this coming up out of the wilderness, leaning on her beloved? So again, we see this level of maturity where she's not depending on her own strength, her own wisdom, her own understanding, but she's coming up out of the wilderness, a place that she's not familiar with, and she's totally dependent on the bridegroom. So then we see her, again, and this closes up. She says, place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm. For love is as strong as death, and its jealousy as enduring as the grave. Love flashes like fire, but the brightest kind of flame. Many waters cannot quench love, nor can rivers drown it. And then here we see the young woman's brothers, or the men of Jerusalem, speaking. And they talk about their little sister. If she's a virgin, she is like a wall. We will protect her with a silver tower. But if she is promiscuous, like a swing door, we will block her with a cedar bar. And she responds, I was a virgin like a wall. In other words, she was saying she did everything right. She was pure when she got married. And again, we know why that would be encouraging for people in that time. They're reading this for the young women and men to understand, that we need to save physical love for marriage. And then the bridegroom says, oh, my darling, lingering in the gardens, your companions are fortunate to hear your voice. Let me hear it too. And she says at the end, come away, my love. Be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountains of spices. Now she is matured to where she is asking him to come away with her, right? So it's full circle. He starts asking her, and then at the end, she's asking him. It's just a powerful book, right? We can kind of see, and there's so many different ways you can explore the Song of Solomon, but I think the most important thing is it really is all about relationship, right? So we can see there's good advice here for marital relationships, for just relationships within the church, but most importantly, it really does highlight the relationship between Christ and us, between Christ and his church. And we see there needs to be a maturing, and in our lives and in our hearts, we need to love the Lord with an unconditional love. We need to love him like he loves us, right? Which is unconditionally. Does anyone have any questions or comments? We have about 10 or 15 minutes, so you guys, I think there's some microphones floating around. So if you have something to add or you have a question, raise your hand. Or if you have a microphone, just go ahead. Oh, Miss Elizabeth.
How old was she?
She was probably very young when they found her for David. I don't know if you remember, they searched for a year for a young woman to take care of David in his old age. So she was probably a teenager at that time. And then she was there for the last few years of David's life. So she was probably in her early 20s. But they say that Abishag was Solomon's greatest love and his first love, right? So we know he married, had 700 wives and 300 concubines. But he wrote it within the first few years of his reign. And it was his greatest song. Remember, he wrote over 3,000 proverbs and over 1,000 songs. And this is the greatest song. So yeah, but she would have been young, probably a few years younger than Solomon. Other questions or comments? Angie.
In chapter 5, it talks about her being beaten and bruised. What is that talking about?
It's talking about the people that found her in the city, right? Let me see.
I think it was in chapter 5.
Yeah, the night watchmen found me as they made their rounds. They beat and bruised me and stripped off my veil, those watchmen on the walls. So again, this is when she was out looking for him after he had come to the door, right? And so then she goes out in the streets and found. Remember how she was saying she didn't want to look for him like a veiled woman or be out in the street. So if a woman was on the street after a certain time, it was automatically assumed that she was a prostitute. So if watchmen or anybody would have found her on the streets, they would have beat her up, or taken her outside the city gate and stoned her. Because, that no decent woman would be out on her own at night. And so that's kind of what that's referring to. Whereas if she would have just let him in, like responded right away, she wouldn't have had to go out looking for him. So that's what that's referring to.
Spiritually, does that mean like, you were referring to she waited too long to open the door, and that's kind of how we are with Christ sometimes? Do you think that would mean like, if we don't come when the Lord asks us to or woos us to, that we would go through something like,
Yeah, I think that, and I've heard a few teachings on this, but I honestly think that it's not, serving the Lord isn't easy, but a lot of times we make it harder than it needs to be, right? So we see people who don't respond to the Lord initially, and sometimes it's because they don't feel worthy, or they feel like they need to pay some sort of penance or do it through their own works, but it's unnecessary. So the other thing I can see in this, because it's the watchmen that beat her up. And so I heard one teaching one time that really stuck with me about this, on how sometimes many of us can be wounded the most in the church, right? By the people who are supposed to be looking out for our best interests. They can say things or do things that end up wounding us and injuring us more than anybody else, right? So I've kind of heard those teachings too, and I think we can all relate to that, to varying degrees, but in this case, it's really, she was just out where she shouldn't have been, trying to find him when he had already been there, right? So I think that's the thing to take away from that. And honestly, I would just look at this more literally, like she was out on the street, and she looked like she was a prostitute because she was out at dark, wearing a veil, unaccompanied. So I think that's what it is. Other questions or comments? Johnny?
Yeah. Excuse me. I noticed in chapter number 2, you started off, she called herself, or she said that she was the Rose of Sharon and the Lily of the Valley.
Mm.
Excuse me?
Yeah,
Hey, that's what they call Jesus.
right. Yeah, but she's saying, I am the Rose of Sharon. And yeah, they do, and they call him the Lily of the Valley. And the bridegroom is actually saying, yeah, you are a lily, like a lily among thorns, right? But the way I would interpret that is we're all meant to be transformed into the image of Christ, right? We're all meant to be Christ-like, and we're all, sons and daughters. Like, that's why when he says my bride, my sister, a lot of times for us, that's like, is that like an incestuous relationship or what's going on there? But the truth of the matter is that we're all the sons and daughters, right? We've all been adopted when we accept Christ into our hearts. Jesus was the firstborn of many brethren, right? So we do have that relationship. But yeah, her saying, I'm the lily of the valley and the rose of Sharon, those are terms referring to Jesus, but in this case, that's also the bride in the Song of Solomon. But yeah, we are to be conformed into the image of Christ. But yeah, that's good.
Another quick question, not
Yeah.
concerning the lesson tonight, but when it talks about be ye holy, for I am holy. I know for us to be holy, holy means to be set apart for God's use. So how do we identify his holiness when we describe him being holy? How is he holy?
I think that, basically we see God's holiness as perfect holiness. And so everything else needs to be cleansed or kept clean or set apart, where God just is holy. He can't be made any more holy, or it doesn't need to be clean. There's nothing that we can do to make God more holy. But there is another level of holiness where we actually set things apart and respect it because it's coming in contact with God, the ultimate of holy beings, right? So that's about as much as my understanding covers it, right? We need to be holy because he is holy, right? But it's not through our works. It's through Christ's work accomplished on the cross.
I would put it like our holiness is a reflection of his holiness.
Yes, that's good.
I think that's
We'll go with that one for 500.
The scripture says we are the temple, and I got to thinking about the temple. The temple was the Holy of Holies, and that's where the priests went to
Right.
be holy. And it says,
Because the presence of God dwelled there. And now the presence of God dwells within us.
so if the temple was holy and that was the Holy of Holies, and the Bible says that we are the temple,
Right. But was it holy because man made it holy? Or was it holy because God abided there?
God abided there.
Right.
And
So-
it said, whoever destroys my temple, I will destroy, or whoever tries to destroy my temple, I will destroy them. So
Right. But yeah, I think that's really a great way to put it. Like, something's holy not because we make it holy, but because God being part of it makes it holy.